big in Korea, why so many traditions have stayed relevant in modern Korea when they've died out in so many other countries. And then from that, trying to figure out how tradition influenced these modern practices, and looking at, in turn, how we can look at tradition in America and how that can kind of shift American performance traditions. Now, very quickly, before I get into the meat of it, a lot of the work that I've done and still do, deals with Mudang, or Korean shaman, people who believe very much in the presence of energies, or spirits, or ghosts, or gods, and who believe that gives a lot to their performance, and they put a lot of stock into it. And I'm not here today to argue for or against the belief in ghosts, rituals, or any kind of religion, but rather to look at the practical uses of shamanism. That, for example, there might be psychological reasons, or there might be biological reasons that rituals might be able to help us. But I have encountered enough ritual to know that there is something to it, whether it's just something about entertainment, or whether there really is something there. But I see nothing to really gain in this short amount of time to try to argue for or against basically what is right or wrong, because that's not something that I look into. That's not what my research focuses on. So I'll move on to next slide. So a very big part of my project was answering these questions. First of all, why is live performance thriving in South Korea? And so that might sound strange to a lot of you, but in America, performance art is really dying down, both financially and in terms of interest and education. However, in South Korea, it's booming. For example, South Korea won the Red Bull BC1 breakdancing competition, which is very strange, but really exciting too. On top of that, South Korea has become a country where failed Broadway shows in America will come here to a number of bored Korean housewives, and they will play to them and play to huge financial success. And on top of that, one of the big things for me is that in Korea, shamanism and shamanic ritual, whether or not people seem to say it, a lot of times people feel very embarrassed about it in everyday life, is that shamanic ritual is still practiced by many people today, and shaman are still seen as functioning members of society, whether or not it's on the surface. And so, on top of that, I wanted to look at not just why performance had become so big in Korea, but if there was some link in the history of Korean performance, which is very unique and interesting in its own right, that influenced why performance is so big in Korea today, and how that influenced kind of modern tradition in Korea. And then finally, what does this say about the role of the performer in modern society? I'm a little bit different from the normal theater major you might meet. I actually hated theater when I first got started. But I felt that while working with performance, there was really something to gain, and there was really something to give through performance art and through human interaction. And so something that I've really been looking at is how can we adjust what the term performer means, what the role of the performer is in modern society, looking at not just someone who creates entertainment, but in turn someone who might act as a Mudang, who acts as a counselor, a guide, a healer, in many different facets to basically do the same thing, which is to move and help your audience. Now, it was very difficult for me to kind of create an idea of what defines Korean theater. For example, in Japan, Japanese theater is very much defined by traditions that have been done in the same way for 500 years. For example, in No theater, the Japanese mask theater, the steps and the lines that they're saying are the exact same thing that they were saying in the 1500s. But Korea was a little different because Korea has changed so much. Rather, I think this quote by Oh Tae-sok, one of Korea's most prominent modern directors and playwrights, really characterizes it very well. Which he talks about changdan, rhythmic patterns in Korean music, and that they always change. And I think this is a very beautiful way to look at what defines Korean theater, and in some ways maybe even Korean art as a whole, in that Korean theater has changed rapidly, that it's transformed throughout time, and that it continues to transform. And it's this malleability that defines Korean performance and is part of why it's become so successful today. Now, a lot of people ask me why Korea when the normal kind of country you would think of in theater is somewhere like England or France, somewhere that's very big and very kind of present in the American view of it. But rather, I think Korea is kind of an untouched gold mine in a sense, for people who are researching performance and performance art. Korea actually has a very unique history of performance. And the way that we would normally think of theater is that there's an audience, there's a performer, and there's a giant stage, and there's almost an invisible barrier in between that people don't cross. But rather, in Korea, for thousands of years, between rituals, mask theater, communal dances, Korean performance actually has always been communal. It's always been a large group, sometimes in a circle, sometimes people would watch in restaurants, but it's always been a communal event for the village or the group. There was never an audience performer barrier. There was never what we call a proscenium stage until the early 1900s, when it was brought over by Japanese colonialists to show propaganda plays, which I don't think many Koreans would be happy with if they do. But on top of that, Korea has exceptionally modern boom in performance, as I mentioned before. And so this, linked with this unique performance tradition, led me to start exploring, why Korea is a really special place, in that it turns the whole idea of performance on its head, but somehow it's extremely successful here. And I think there's really something to learn when we bring those techniques back to America. And most of all for me, I feel very connected to, and I respect a lot of the work that a shaman do, although I also understand there are a lot of fakes and there's a lot of controversy around it, which I don't dispute. I know there's a lot of different stories that go to it. But in South Korea, shamanism has actually gotten bigger over economic development. Even right now, there's over 40,000 registered Mudang Korean shaman who are in kind of the national directory of shamanism. And then even more on top of that who might not be connected with the national organization. And so the reason I chose Korea, and part of the reason why I was very interested in Mudang, is because Mudang were able to do something, I wasn't sure what when I first got here, that helped them survive in the modern world. And in terms of that, I was looking at not only what they show us about how shamanism can work and what it can give to the modern world, but more importantly, something that I feel very close to is trying to preserve shamanism and ancient traditions in different countries through economic development, when it's normally stamped out in an attempt to kind of quote-unquote be modern. Now, just a quick overview of different kinds of performance. In Korea, what you see right here is a picture of talchum, a Korean mask dance. This would be done in different villages. There are a number of different kinds of specific talchum, but talchum kind of connected to what I was talking about earlier with these large communal performances, as they would often end with the audience and the actors all coming together and dancing together, laughing together, sometimes with a group hug, where everyone would feel kind of healed, where everyone would feel that they built a community. And so on top of that, there's also lots of communal dances. In many ways, it was regional. Different villages, different areas, you could say different states, would all have their own special performance. And in this way, Korea was able to develop a large number of very different performances that were done in very different manners, but were able to exist side by side. In turn, this allowed a lot of different traditions to form over this time. And one of the very big things present in Korean performance that really drew me to it is spirituality. And rather, if you look at the ancient Hanshan writing of it, the term for it to be excited in Korean means for the gods to be present. And this is because many Koreans in ancient Korea believed that when they would party, when they would have fun together, when they would laugh and sing and cry together, that the gods would become present and kind of amazing magic things would happen. And so this spirituality was very closely connected to the performances that were happening, which is something that's very different from the Western view of it, where it was sometimes used for entertainment and at other times used as a place to either see or be seen. So I've mentioned the word a lot, but I'm sure some of you are confused. But what is a Mudang? So a Mudang is a Korean shaman, a healer or fortune teller, who performs and will tell the future, among other things, not by doing something themselves, but by what they claim is being possessed by a ghost, where they empty their body as a vessel and then a god, which can range anywhere from the spirit of a small child to the spirit of an old man, to a crabby old ajumma, to a statue of Lyndon B. Johnson. the Mudang really has the freedom to kind of choose whatever they want their main ghost to be, will come down, inhabit their body, and will do a number of crazy things and dancing around for a while, and then something amazing will happen. And they do this by performing kut, which are the Korean shamanist rituals. And during these kut, and there are different kind of set patterns for kut that happen for different purposes, that can tell fortunes or heal people or exorcise evil spirits, and also act as general advisors by being connected to the concept of mu, which is a little bit difficult to get in right now. That could be a Fulbright project in itself. But for now, you can think of the concept of mu as the collective Korean subconscious. In a sense, how Korean people act in the ways that they don't say they will act. And so, and on top of all this, many of the Mudang who I worked with talked about, they felt a major responsibility in facilitating Pungyu, which I have become very attached to in my research because it's finally a word that defines something I've been looking for a long time. Pungyu is in Korean the invisible connection and the invisible exchange that happens when we meet face to face, and that something changes within us by speaking and being with another person. And if that's a little bit too cheesy, you can just think of it as the warm, fuzzy feeling you get when you see someone who you like. But so Pungyu is basically the main mission of Mudang at its core. And this is something that beyond the ghosts, beyond the fortune telling, beyond all the things that are very controversial, I think is something any really good performer can back, that we want to create this exchange between people. So, quickly, what is a kut? These are the Korean shamanist ritual. They can heal people of mental or sometimes physical sickness, at least according to the Mudang, exorcise evil spirits, bring good luck, and there are many different facets. There are hundreds of different kut. And each different kut centers around a moment of divine presence, where they bring down the gods so much that basically something amazing can happen, and they do something amazing to prove that the god is present. And this can range anywhere from balancing a pig carcass on a pitchfork, to slaughtering a cow in the street, to dancing on knives without cutting their feet. All of which happen, and of which there is a number of video, which leads to many people to think sometimes people are skeptics, sometimes people will believe in it wholly, but that there is something very unique going on with this performance that your normal performer can't necessarily achieve. And these will often take days at a time. It's not just a 2-hour dance. And rather, it's something where the Mudang will spend days preparing meals for the guests, who will be eating and drinking the entire time as the Mudang is performing the ritual. Now, this might still seem fairly confusing, as a kut is a very complicated, interesting thing, but I have some video, actually, of a kut that I attended with Mudang, a Mudang who I worked with extensively. And this is very early in the morning of the kut that I was at, which was a good luck ritual, an exorcism ritual for a store that was opening above his house. And basically the whole purpose of the kut was to clean the area of evil spirits and create good luck and good fortune for the new business that was opening. And that's one of the main patrons of Mudang generally, business owners. And so here, this is this is an early on cleansing part of the ritual. The kut hasn't even really gotten started yet, but this drummer, another Mudang hired by Mudang for the whole ritual, will drum for 5 or 6 hours straight, just trying to purify the area and get rid of the smaller evil spirits. And in turn, Mudang will continually pray to his god. He hasn't been possessed yet. He'll take this time to pray to his god and try to bring his god down. At the same time, guests of the kut are eating and drinking. Alcohol is very present in kut, actually, because they want to make people happy, bring down that whole concept of pungyu, that whole concept of being excited, to bring down the gods and make the gods present. And so the audience being happy is a key aspect of the kut in itself. Here we've kind of gotten into the meat of the kut as it's starting to get very close to the moment of divine presence. Right here, Mudang has actually been possessed, or you can think that he just lost his mind, which is trying to be more rational about it. But in this moment he's dancing and starting to channel the spirit, and in turn starting to channel many different ghosts that happen, many different ghosts that would come forth. Because beyond the ghosts that he channels, he's trying to bring forth many different good spirits and gods from the Korean land to come forth. And so something that's very interesting to me as a director about this is that while Mudang will take the time to plan the whole arc of what's going on, right here he's actually, because he's possessed, because he's not thinking rationally, he's actually improvising everything. And improvisation, in many ways, unless it's specifically improvisation, has started to fade away, unless it's like improv comedy, it started to fade away from American theater. And so to see kind of the value of what he does was fascinating to me, and I think it's something that I'd like to use in my work in the future. And a very big thing for Mudang is that when they're doing these coups, he's obviously using his body very intensely physically, but he'll do this for hours at a time. And I've actually encountered a number of Mudang who have hurt themselves, actually, who've broken arms and limbs by forcing themselves to do the coup for entire days at a time, even though they'll be in pain, because to them, completing the ritual and doing the ritual for their clients is far more important than their own health, which has its virtues and drawbacks in terms of how you work with performers in modern theater today, but I think is very admirable to at least see their determination in it. So right here, this is when it's getting very, very close to the climax of the coup. Actually, just after this, he takes the pig and balances it on the pitchfork, which while I was allowed to video a lot of the ritual, was not allowed to video that, because it was considered a moment of something truly amazing. Now, what's going on here is Gumgang has actually, or Gumgang's spirit, according to Mudang, is that he started going out and taking out members of the audience and bringing them in if he feels that there is an evil spirit or something that must be exorcised from them, some kind of bad luck. And so he'll take them and set them down, and setting these spiritual objects over them will do things like spit mop holy out or throw knives over them to try to hurt or banish the evil spirits. And so this showed me in a lot of ways how traditional Korean coup, in many ways, I thought Korea was a place that broke down the audience performance barrier, but this showed me that it never really existed. The audience in coup are always present. It's their job to be excited and happy, and then it's their job to be present and have these spirits exercised during the ritual. And so the audience are essential to the success of what's going on. And it goes very much against kind of the traditional idea that an audience member is just a ticket that you're selling to someone you're trying to entertain, but rather they're a part of something bigger that's much bigger that's happening. So, some of that was probably very interesting to many of you, or made it just seem very strange. I'm sure the big question is, how does that connect to modern Korean theater? I mean, what does that have to do with the modern world? And I think there's actually a lot to it, even though it's not necessarily obvious. And I think a very good example that can get us started on it is right here, Nanta, which is something that I'm sure everyone in here has at least seen an ad for at some point. And so, how does modern Korean performance connect to these rituals, these things that have gone on? And to me, I saw a lot of different Korean performances that happened, but Korea still is very connected to this idea of large communal events of excitement. And Nanta, even though it's adopted the Western model of having an audience and a stage, members of Nanta never feel hesitant to go out into the audience and bring people up on stage, to throw things out into the audience. And one of the major draws of the show is actually that you can get hit by food that's flying as the chefs are cooking and throwing it around. And so this goes back to the whole idea that it's a large communal event where they're trying to make the audience excited and happy and interact with them. And so it goes beyond just trying to entertain, and goes back to these coups that were happening, at least from what I've seen. And rather that the whole goal of performance in Korea is to create this excitement still. And on top of that, I've seen over 50 performances since I've been here, including traditional, very modern, large and small. But out of all those, across every different genre, I would say about 9 out of 10 of those shows also involved some kind of gift giving, which is a very big part of Koot, was a very big part of Talchum, and which is a very big part of how a lot of modern theater scholars will look at the job of a performer is to give themselves to the audience. And so, linking back to Koot and how Mudang would be very encouraged to give alcohol and food to their patrons, many times in modern Korean theater, they'll give tickets, T-shirts, sometimes shampoo, lots of different things, and but always in giving themselves to the audience, always trying to give something to the other person. And I put here breaking the audience-performer barrier, but as I said before, it's basically that the audience-performer barrier doesn't really exist in the same way that it does in other parts of the world. And so with that, Korean performers are very, very comfortable with reaching out and meeting with and dealing with the audience in a number of ways. I actually was at a small horror performance by students a little while ago, and they would actually turn off all the lights, throw water on the audience, grab their ankles, and swing blankets over them, which there were a lot of screams, but it was a lot of fun. And they weren't afraid to do it, whereas in America, everyone would kind of be afraid of a lawsuit. So, one other thing that I worked with while I was here and would take some lessons in to get a better understanding of how Korean youth learn how to dance is the street dance movement. Now, street dance is kind of an Asian term, but it includes all different kinds of modern dance, including popping, locking, walking, which I didn't know about, but was actually created in South Korea as a method of expressing homosexuality when it was very, very taboo. And obviously breakdancing. And so Korea won the Red Bull BC1 tournament. Breakdancing is huge, there's schools all over. You can see people doing it on the street often here. But the big question to me was, why is all this so popular in Korea? Because I'd actually researched breakdancing for a little while in undergrad, and the main influences of it were South American dance, African dance, and North American dance, which it's great that Koreans are so good at it, but they didn't have any indigenous traditions that influenced them to be so good at it. It didn't influence them to have any interest in it, so why is it so big? And so, to me, during my research and speaking and working with Korean youth, taking classes with them, I feel that a major part of it is this underlying idea of performance in Korea that's so different from other parts of the world. Because breakdancing, popping, locking, really centers around a large communal performance. It's very rare that you just watch a breakdancer on stage with everyone sitting. Everyone will stand around in a circle and watch someone who's extremely good dance in the center. And then any member of the audience is free to come in and challenge the dance that they just did with their own work. So in a sense, the audience and the performer mixes together. And on top of that, it goes with the earlier quote about Ote Sok, where everything is constantly changing, everything is constantly evolving, as breakdancing is something that has to be improvised. It's never completely choreographed. And in many ways, I think Korea taking to this shows that the country is still very connected to this culture of performance, to this improvisational idea of performance. Now, here's a quick overview of my experiences, because I felt that to really understand it and to gain things that I could really use as a director and as an artist, I would have to go out and experience things, not just sit back and observe and record. And so this would start off with meeting a lot of Mudang and getting a lot of very interesting fortunes on the way, but taking the time to interview different shaman and learn about how they viewed their role as performers, how they viewed how they serve people, and how they basically trained to do their koot and dance in the way that they did. And after becoming very close with some of them, I chose one shaman, Kumgang here, who had the koot earlier, to live and learn and train with in many different facets, not just to learn about how he lives as a Mudang, but to really take some exploration into how he goes beyond just performing in the way that he serves his clients, including ways that he approaches health, acupuncture, things like that. This also included dance classes with my advisor, who likes to go by his stage name, Mr. Snakewave, who was one of the top street dancers back in the 80s when it was starting to get big in Korea, and taking the time to learn how to pop it which I'm not very good at. But I felt that the best way to learn how Koreans felt about breakdancing and this kind of dancing was to take the time to learn how they learn, because it is very different from the way that many American dancers would go about it. And lastly, of course, to work with different modern theater companies and workers all over Seoul, from large companies to small companies, to take the time to look at, even when they've taken on some Western models of how they manage things financially and how they put on the shows, to look at how they still stay very connected to the Korean experience. Now, I'll take a little time to go over my time with Mudang as a Mudang, as it's very rare for a foreigner to receive the time to be able to live and learn with a shaman, especially in a place like Korea. And so it's something I felt very humbled by, and is a fairly unique experience that I'd like to share. Now, one of the things that Mudang was very passionate about was keeping a proper diet and keeping homemade remedies, traditional Korean remedies and medicines. Now, one thing that was very interesting to me is that most modern Mudang are not against modern medicine in any way, as many people would normally assume. Rather, he sees it as, one more tool to help other people. But on top of that, there are other problems that may not necessarily need modern medicine, or may not be able to be helped in the right way that he serves. And so right here, on the top right, that is a gamgi, that is a dried persimmon, which he would give to patients to help them with diarrhea or digestive problems. Under it, you see a plum juice that is used to remedy a sore throat, or also to help clear a cold. And right there, you will actually see sujeonggwa, which is not exclusively a Mudang remedy by any means. It's a traditional Korean remedy. But when mixed with several herbs and natural ingredients that Mudang would add to it, becomes something that very much helps blood flow, and very much helps circulation, and also clears the sinuses, which I really like because I get sinus infections a lot. And so watching it boil there, it involved real bark of cinnamon, frozen ginger, and honey, and a number of other herbs and spices that he added to help and give to his guests, not just as a cure for a disease, but something that they could drink all the time to help them improve their daily health. One other very interesting thing that Mudang taught me while I was working with him is about hyochori, of which the best translation to English is death point. And it's a little bit of a scary name because it's a scary thing. So what hyochori, so what you'll see in the picture here as an my very rather interestingly drawn notes, because that's why I'm a director, not a drawer. But what hyochori are is, at least in Mudang's explanation, is Mudang believes very much in the idea of ki, energy that's constantly flowing throughout the body. And so Mudang would see these points as points where your ki is concentrated and flowing through very rapidly in a very small point. And for the more scientific minds out there, these are also points where your blood vessels are concentrating and into a very small point. And what he would use is these during massages to help circulation and release energy in the body, to help release stress, and help people improve circulation and improve the way they'd feel every day. But there's another side to it too. If someone wasn't really careful and wasn't really aware of it, or had ill intent with it, hitting any one of these points was about 24 in total all over the body. Hitting any one of these points too hard will result in at least unconsciousness and many times death. And so this was kind of humbling for me to go back, and many performers in America during the golden age of performance spent a lot of time studying anatomy, spent a lot of time studying the body and understanding their body as not just something that you're using to speak and move, but as your tool and your best friend as a performer. And so this reminded me of kind of the importance of taking the time to understand your body and understand the way that it works. Also showing me how fragile people really are, and kind of the danger that comes in trying to help people, and that there is always another side to it. So right here, this is Gumgang's classic massage. And right here you'll see that he's going through. This is not too different from, starts off not too different from a normal massage you'd see. And yeah, it hurts. It's very good, but it hurts.
Is that you making noise about it?
So first he goes down and he starts off just by trying to fix up the spine a little bit. But right here you see that he's actually starting to put a lot of pressure on the hyochari, which he considers probably the most important part of the massage. I felt it. But this kind of goes with the classic idea of how shaman approach healing, which is that they're not there just to make you feel better or more comfortable, but they will essentially help take you through something where you're going to feel a lot of pain for a short period of time, but in the long term your life will become much better. Here he's pretending my toes are little piggies, because and here you see an example of Gumgang doing something that he would do often with me in his massages, and is really interesting to me as a performer and trying to give to the audience. Is what he's doing now is he's going through my toes, and then he hits one point where I scream, and then he stops there and starts asking me what I did over the weekend. Did I drink a lot? And even though at first I answered no, I didn't, he was very much correct. And so at different times, Gumgang, through different kinds of massages, was able to go through my body and find things out about me by finding out where the pain was. And seeing this knowledge of the body and how he could help me with it really made me think about how a performer can help other people by helping them understand their bodies more too. For example, he found one point in my body that hurt a lot. It was literally the size of a pin, basically. I didn't even know how he found it. But after that, he said, "Oh, did you have an obesity problem when you were a teenager?" Which it's not a secret, but I never talked about it. And I said, "Yeah." And so there were a lot of moments like that where he could discover a lot of things about my life and how I'd lived just by looking at these pressure points and the blood flow in my body. Here are a number of quotes that I got from Gumgang that I really enjoyed about looking at shamanism in the modern era and performance in the modern era. First of which is, legitimacy has to be changed according to the times. And so his explanation for one of the main reasons Korean Mudang survived when shaman in other countries fell apart was because Korean shaman were able to say, it's not about the traditions we've been doing. It's not about doing the same thing over and over. It's about our mission. It's about helping people. And we'll change with the times, whatever that is. So that meant accepting modern medicine, buying smartphones, and but still keeping up the major traditions and keeping up the whole basic concept of being possessed by ghosts and giving themselves to help other people. And basically give themselves to help the community, which goes to the power of a shaman lies within the community. And to become a Mudang is not about finding power for yourself, but giving yourself and sacrificing yourself to help the people around you. And I think that's somewhere that American performers in many senses really need to start moving towards, is this concept that we're there to help other people, we're there to improve the condition of other people, and that we have to tie our success to how other people do, not just in what we gain. Something very practical, price must be adjusted according to the prosperity of the client. And so in that way we're able to financially sustain ourselves while still giving people the things that they need. And this harkens back to Robert Wilson's Einstein on the Beach, which is quoted by many people as one of the greatest American performances of all time, where he would sell some tickets for $2,000 and sell some tickets for $2, depending on who was buying it. And this way he allowed many different people to all be able to see this grand performance that he put on. Something that was very reassuring to me was just, even when cockroaches disappear from the earth, Mudang will remain. Where many other shamans that I've met in other countries are very afraid that their way of life is going to die out. But Gumgang feels that Mudang and what Mudang do is so conducive and so integrated with Korean life that there is no way to get away from it. That if Mudang go extinct, then Korea goes extinct. And it was interesting to see that tie between culture. And most of all, I love this quote, shaman has to be able to give up the traditional concept of status of chief priest in modern society. I now have to approach the role as a teacher, a friend, and a lover of the public. And I think this is how American performers in general really need to start approaching the way that we do our work now. We live in a different world where people don't need to be entertained by one movie that comes out. They have a world at their fingertips and a smartphone that can entertain them. So now what can we give and what can we do to help other people? I don't think America needs another Will Smith, and America definitely doesn't need another Jaden Smith. But I think performers can evolve and adapt to basically become these lovers of the public, become these mentors, become these friends. Now, why is this all special? I do literally think that Korea is a holy grail of studying modern performance. I know holy grail is a strong term, that's why I used it. It's because in the 70s, when studying performance was becoming very big, most scholars kind of overlooked Korea. They spent a lot of time in places like Africa, Siberia, and the Arctic. But South Korea was passed over, even though South Korea has so many fantastic traditions and has so much of this kind of lack of existence of this audience performer barrier and doing performance for higher purposes. And I think Korea is a great place for researchers of all kinds to come in and start doing work to modify the way they do their art. Also, something that's very important to me is the preservation of indigenous traditions during economic development, which South Korea has been able to achieve with incredible success. And by looking at the way that South Korea approaches it, we can find ways to help these traditions stay alive while countries can still adapt things like smartphones, networks, and new technologies. And most of all, this whole project has given me insights into how shamanism has survived. And looking at the benefits of shamanism, that there is still something that it can give to society. And from that, how do they do it? How do they adapt? How do you still do the same thing in a completely different world, which Mudang have been very successful with? And on top of that, how does shamanism continue to survive day to day? What do people need from it, and what are they learning from it? And I think Korea has a lot of fantastic answers to that. Now for me, what is my next step? This picture actually isn't from Korea. This is from Jerzy Grotowski, one of my favorite director theorists, a movement called Poor Theater. It's essentially an entire new way of approaching performance that Grotowski created himself. And this is something that I'm looking to do. Kind of the larger mission of what I've been doing, as much as I love Korea individually, is looking at many different countries and many different traditions, gathering these different traditions and gathering these different practices and ways of training from different parts of the world, and melding it all together into one single method that can help us with everyday life, that helps us train as performers, and helps us train as better members of the community. And putting this all together to look at what have people in the past been doing that helped their lives, and how can we take what they learned in the past and apply it to modern life now for the problems that we're facing in the modern day. And on top of this, I want to use all that information to reinvent the idea of the American performer. As I was saying before, it's not about just entertaining people anymore. How do we look at a new way for the performer to survive? How do we complete this mission of giving ourselves to the audience, of helping people, of making them feel moved, without having to put them in a room and force them to sit for 2 hours without going to the bathroom? And so what can we do to evolve that? How can we become more present in other people's lives? And finally, one thing that's a long-term goal to me is to work on a new American shaman. I use that term very loosely. I'm not talking about people in America becoming possessed, but rather I'm talking about a new kind of work or a new kind of identity in America that serves the same purpose that shamans serve, as friends, as guides, as mentors, as people who can help with worries about the future or psychological problems. And in turn, by reinventing this new person in America, this new American shaman, this new modern performer, to facilitate and aid and deal with these issues in America, many of which I feel are present in Korea as well, but basically are remedied in many ways by these Mudang, by these shamans. Here are a number of sources. Thank you. I know that I was trying to get a very broad look at all the work I was doing, so I know at some points it may have seemed like it went from point A to C, but I'm totally open to questions here or by the food later about things that happened in point B. So now is a 15-minute Q&A session. Yeah.
At several points, you made a clear distinction between entertainment and everything else. I mean, what is entertainment? Where's the Where do you draw the line between that and when something else happens?
For me personally, as a director and an artist, the line between entertainment and things that you could say heal us or really move us and change us is that entertainment is something that's done simply to either kill time or simply be talked about. So for example, back in kind of the Reformation era, back in the West, people would often go to the theater, but they would simply go to put on very nice clothes, see and be seen, and just watch people move around on stage for a while. There was no real investment in it because it was a social, but it was because it was just very much a surface level social practice. And so at that time it worked because people didn't have anything to do. But today I would consider that kind of entertainment, you know, you get on your phone and you use Angry Birds, or you check Facebook or something like that. And so because that has replaced what theater used to do, I mean, the big question with theater several decades ago was, now that film is really big, how does theater survive? And yet somehow it has. To me, the big question is, you know, how do we recreate those feelings of moving someone, of changing someone, of healing someone? And so I think that's the big line between entertainment, that there is something, and it really comes down to the audience's interpretation of it. And if you can give it to the audience and take it there, then it's beyond entertainment. But even if you try but it fails, then, you know, it is just basically a worse version of Angry Birds.
If I can add just one thing. Many hundreds of years ago, there was a movie called Performance, in which one of the lines is, the only performance that makes it, that really makes it, is the performance that achieves madness.
Yeah.
That's
I like that.
very much fun.
Yeah.
Basically, I believe that the origin of the ritual thing is the origin of theater and dancing, I think.
Mhm.
So, for example, we can see Mudang in the point of entertainment,
Mhm.
as an entertainment.
Yeah.
But I'd like to focus on the basic ritual thing. For example, after big festival or big pleasant thing or joyful thing, then in the point of the ritual, it must be sacrifice. For example, human being sacrifice after the kind of entertainment thing, then it was a human being sacrifice or animal sacrifice. That's ritual. What I mean is, this kind of thing is contain the violence thing. So I think it's very important thing of a ritual thing and entertainment thing also has a spiritual thing. So my question is, you think you can separate from the kind of ritual thing. You can just purely can give entertainment thing. So can you? I hope you can understand my asking.
Yeah, I think.
Yes, in the point, especially these days, I don't know why, these days, the kind of traditional thing, they comes from in the past, usually. So I think there are so many things, these traditional thing is in nowadays. So why? I think why? As you can see, good in the good, you see the animal sacrifice. As you know that. So our entertainment has, I think, some violence thing. So for me, it's very difficult. It's difficult to sympathy or into this kind of thing. So I'd like to hear your opinion on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think.
In the point, I think between Christianity and other shaman things, I think it's a big difference from thing. So anyway, I think why Western or Christianity countries very tolerant about this shaman things. I'd like to hear your opinion.
Yeah, I think there's always a lot of danger that comes with shamanism. I mean, whether it's ghosts or whether it's just someone's subconscious, you're dealing with very dangerous things, and you're dealing with rituals that, for lack of a better term and very colloquially, have been designed to basically mess with you for thousands of years. And so you're getting into a point of people that we still really don't completely understand. And so where we are dealing with sometimes points of violence and sacrifice. But at the same time, I mean, I think in the same way that you'll find many different kinds of Christians in the world, in the same way you find many different kinds of shaman. Especially in the West, there's kind of this strange fantasy about shamanism that's formed in the last few decades, that people go to shaman to gain power so that they can control other people or that they can become extremely strong for themselves. But that's not really what shamanism is about for 90% of the time. It's about putting yourself through extremely grueling training and then sacrificing yourself, essentially, to help your community. And lots of these coming-of-age rituals will involve starving yourself, going out in the woods with just a knife on your own, and killing an animal and bringing it back to the village, and then allowing the entire village to eat it while you don't get to eat anything, because it teaches you what it means to give yourself to other people, to sacrifice yourself for other people. And so while I think the whole concept of sacrifice is present in some shamanism, I think it's very much blown up by people who either don't like shamanism or want to exoticize it. A big thing that I learned about Mudang while I was here is that Mudang are very practical. It's about fixing everyday problems. It's not about appeasing the gods. It's about bringing the gods down to help other people. And I think that's one of the main factors that you can look at to find a good shaman versus a bad shaman, which is someone that wants to sacrifice to appease the gods, to please them and to gain power. So it's a very complex question, and I can get into more of it later, but it's...
And one more than breaking the barrier, breaking between audience and performer. I think it's a sort of chaos situation. Usually, the separated thing can save individuals' life, because because it gives our rational thing, but the kind of breaking the barrier, it becomes transgression thing. Yes, transgression, right? So I think if then it occurs something violent thing, for example, anyway, someone must be killed, or some animals must be killed after chaos situation. If then we can accept this shaman thing purely, you think, just as entertainment?
Well, I mean,
so I'm very thinking about so much about this, because yes, spiritual thing always existing anything in my opinion. So I'd like to tolerate this shaman thing, but still hesitate to think because of the hidden violence thing. So lastly, I'd like to hear your opinion about that.
this gets a little bit more into my personal philosophy about it. But to me, I totally understand that there's something chaotic about it and there's a risk of violence. But at the same time, if you want to actually connect with another human being, if you want to actually, feel concept where you really feel that you're present and there with another person, you have to risk violence. You have to risk hurting each other. You have to risk hurting yourself, which is a lot of theorists would call the great sacrifice of the performer, is that you're putting yourself out there. You're stripping away the shield that you have in modern society, in orderly society, so that people can see you as you really are, and that you are vulnerable, and that people can hurt you in that moment. But at the same time, because you do that, if that other person becomes vulnerable with you, you share a moment that will never be able to be replicated. And so I think it's worth the risk of violence, at least to me, and that's my personal philosophy. Because to me, if we live in a world that completely loses the shamanism, that completely loses, as you would put it, this chaos, then we also lose the chance to really connect. And then we begin living in a world where we're simply going about the things that people have wanted us to go about, rather than really connecting with who we are as human beings. Yeah.
Question. Like, how long did you stay with Kumgang, and where does he usually stay? Like, in the middle of Seoul, or and what was the most difficult thing during your stay with him?
Kumgang actually lives in a rural town called Chuncheon, which is an hour away. And then in that rural town, he lives in a very rural giant field where he has his own garden. And yet many clients will actually drive up to him just to see him because they respect him so much. I'd stay him with sometimes between 3 to 4 days, sometimes just 1 or 2, sometimes a week at a time, over a number of different periods. So the most difficult thing, beyond just the language barrier, which we actually figured out how to get around after a while, was simply even though I'd already met with him and respected him a lot, it took a while to learn to trust him, as I'm sure it would for anyone who comes up to you and says, "You should drink this, it's going to make you feel better." And of course I was a little bit skeptical, but by learning and growing with him, I learned to trust him, and everything he's done has really helped me. And it's shown me how we build trust with our audience, with clients, and how we can use that in kind of, I guess, a modern shamanism. I think we have time for one more.
You might feel that this is kind of beyond the scope of your project, because you're focused on the performance aspect, but I was just wondering what role the government might play in sort of shaping what traditions make it through the modern filter. Because Korea has a pretty extensive cultural heritage preservation office and system. So, and shaman are definitely, I think they're categorized as cultural treasures in some cases. So, do you know how much the government has, of a role the government has played in actually preserving tradition, even sort of beyond their own powers to adapt to modern society?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. It's something I didn't really go into here, but the government has done a great job as when during modernization in other countries, even if kind of the general consensus of people was that they wanted to keep shaman around, there were a lot of groups that felt that shamanism made them very non-modern, and so they would be stamped out. They would sometimes be murdered, sometimes burned out, chased out of their own countries. But the Korean government, by making them World Heritage treasures, has really preserved them and helped protect them from a lot of outside forces who, while they still protest them and dislike Mudang, have never really had the opportunity to murder or really hurt Mudang, which is actually a problem that goes on in North Korea right now. And so I really respect the government and the work that they've done. And a lot of the politicians have also supported Mudang from the underground, because a lot of them go to Mudang for good luck rituals during their elections. So it works both ways.